So in today's video, we're going to be going over every team in the ACC. So we're going to be previewing all of them. We're going to preview three core things with each team. We're going to preview their head coach, their schedule, and their quarterback. To me, these are the three most important factors when talking about who can potentially not only win their conference, but go over their win total. Each team will be looking at their odds to win the conference, also their win total. I think that gives us a pretty good idea of what the expectation is for these teams. In this video, it will be two parts. I think each part's going to be about an hour, so I thought I'd put it into two parts. The first video, we're just going to tackle all the teams in the lower half, so we're going to be tackling Boston College, Stanford, North Carolina, Syracuse, Wake Forest, Duke, Florida State, and Georgia Tech. If you are a fan of any of the other teams and want to see them, it will be in part two, which will be uploaded right after the part one, so don't worry about that. So here, let's get into it, and we'll start with Boston College, obviously. So the first team we're going to talk about today is Boston College. They have a plus 40,000 odds. So if you put $100 on them to win the ACC, you could win $40,000. Their over/under win total this year is 3.5. So first, let's look at last season. Last season was a very rough year for them. They went 2-10, and they won their first game of the year against Fordham, lost 10 straight games, and then finished at Syracuse with a 34-12 win. Looking at it, to be fair, to end the season, they actually ended pretty well. A 25-10 loss against Notre Dame is pretty good when you consider just how bad Notre Dame beat everyone last year. And then a 36-34 Georgia Tech 2-point loss is really good as well before that Syracuse win. So they had some success to end the year, and I think the question is, can they build on that? And so if we go look at last year, it was all over the place. Quarterback wise, they didn't get the best quarterback play, but they also didn't get, completely terrible quarterback play. Points per game wise, 85 out of 136, so just slightly below average, but the defense was really bad. 123rd out of 126, just could not, stop anybody. Bill O'Brien was head coach last year, and he's going to be back. It's going to be his third year. So if we look at 2024, they went 7-6, scored 28 points per game, gave up 24 points per game. So if you want to know what from 24 to 25 was the biggest difference, it was that the defense fell off a cliff. So obviously it's going to be a new defensive coordinator this year. It's going to be Ted Roof. So Ted Roof, he's been at everywhere. Was at UCF before this as defensive coordinator. But the one job we will highlight is he was the defensive coordinator at Penn State when Bill O'Brien was there um, as head coach. Led those Penn State teams to some pretty good defenses, and obviously that was coming off the Sandusky scandal when Bill O'Brien kept Penn State on track. So the hope is that Roof can come in here at Boston College and just make them a better defense, better than what they ranked last year, which was 123rd out of 136. So their starting quarterback next year is projected to be Mason McKenzie. Mason McKenzie comes from an FCS program. If you look at his FCS stats here, he passed for 2,000 yards, 17 TDs, and 11 interceptions on about 60% completion percentage. And then the rushing ability is 900 yards and 10 TDs on the ground. So very exciting when you consider that dual threat ability. He averaged 85 rushing yards per game and 189 passing yards per game. So they're getting that sort of dual threat ability that I think Bill O'Brien wants. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but Bill O'Brien is taking over play calling ability. So last year they had an offensive coordinator, and their offensive coordinator last year left for the NFL. He's going to be on the coaching staff of the Chicago Bears. So Bill O'Brien decided to come in and be the offensive coordinator this year. So finally, let's look at the schedule. So keep in mind, they have a win total of 3.5. And it is a tough schedule. They play 11 Power 4 teams. They're opening the season at Cincinnati. Then they are going at home against Rutgers. Maine is their only non-Power 4 team before they get into conference play, where it's Virginia Tech at SMU before that bye. They then get Pitt at Georgia Tech, at Duke, Florida State at home, at Notre Dame, Syracuse, at Miami. So while the 3.5 number seems very low, when you see this schedule, while there are a lot of winnable games, I would say, it's like Cincinnati, I don't think is going to be amazing. Rutgers isn't going to be amazing. Um, Virginia Tech is does have James Franklin, but there's still a little bit of rebuilding process there. Georgia Tech lost Haynes King. Duke lost Mencia to Miami, funny enough, and Florida State. Who knows what to make of them? And Syracuse, of course. So there's winnable games, but it's the fact that they have all these games. They only play one non-power four team, so really they only get one win that we can bank in, and that's probably going to be the only game that Boston College is going to be favored this season. They're going to be underdogs probably 11 times this season. Maybe Syracuse they're favored against, but even then I think Syracuse is going to be better this year than they were last year. So it's going to be a very rough season. If I had to guess, I would lean on the under here. I think this is a 3-9 team. I could definitely see them squeak out 4-8. I think Ted Roof coming in does help a little bit. I think the defense will be better than they were last year. I think Bill O'Brien maybe will have the offense a little better than last year as well. So I could see them winning 4 or 5 games. But I definitely don't think it'll be easy, especially when you consider they play 11 Power 4 teams and have a very hard schedule, especially down the stretch, with 2 of your last 3 games being at Notre Dame and at Miami. So it's just a very hard schedule from Boston College this year, and that is the reason that they have a 3.5 win total and that they are the worst odds to win the ACC. So the next team we look at is Stanford. Stanford is plus 30,000 to win the ACC. Looking at their over/under, it is also like Boston College 3.5. So let's look at last year. Last year they went 4-8. Started the year with a 3-point loss at Hawaii. Got wins over Boston College, San Jose State, and a win over Cal late in the year. Some notable games. They had a 5-point loss against North Carolina as well, and then obviously the 3-point loss against Hawaii. Other than that, the rest were double-digit losses. And even the San Jose State win was only a 1-point win. So, again, we look at 2025. They had Frank Reich as their head coach, and the offense was very abysmal. It was 18 points, 18.8 points per game, 122nd. The defense wasn't much better, 96 out of 136, giving up 29 points per game. The good news is just about everything is going to be new at Stanford, including their head coach. Tavita Pritchard is their new head coach. And in terms of experience, he doesn't have any. He was at Stanford for 12 years as an assistant, started as an assistant, then a running backs coach, quarterbacks coach slash receivers coach, eventually went and became the offensive coordinator slash quarterbacks coach. In 2023, he left for Washington to be the quarterbacks coach. Coach Jaden Daniels, who did very well at Washington, and now he is back as the head coach at Stanford. So this is a huge swing. And the main thing to remember with Stanford is Andrew Luck is running the show now. So there's definitely a lot of pressure on Andrew Luck to come in. He's got a lot of control behind the scenes, so just remember that. But Tatvia, not a lot of experience, but could be good, could be bad. So you look at their quarterback room, and it's a lot of unproven guys. Dylan Risk is a redshirt junior. He's coming in from UCF. Mike Mitchell, freshman. Charlie Meir is a redshirt senior. Devin McNeary is a freshman as well. And then Davis Warren is probably the only guy you've heard of. Of course, he was at Michigan. He was hurt all last year. And so let's take a look at some of their potential quarterbacks, the only 3 who have played any. So, of course, there's Davis Ward. He's played in a good amount of games at Michigan in 2024. He played in 9 games, 64% completion percentage, 1,200 yards, 7 TDs, 9 interceptions. If you remember, he was not very good at all. I remember that Ohio State game. He came in for a little bit, and it was bad. It was really, really, really bad. If we go look at it against Ohio State, it was 9 for 16, 56%, and 2 interceptions. So doesn't give you a lot of confidence when this is the projected starter by most guys. However, Dylan Risk is kind of the main competition. He was at UCF. He's a redshirt junior. Uh, Last year, 61.5% completion percentage. Actually, sorry, last year in 2024, 61.5% completion percentage, 72 for 117, 5 TDs, 2 interceptions. So definitely a lot better than Davis Warren. So right now, it's seeming like a battle between those two. Charlie Meir is the only other guy who's got stats. He was 2 for 3, 22 yards, 1 TDs, no interceptions, and the only time the little game action he had last year, so I don't think he's truly a contender. but I thought I would bring them up anyways. So let's go ahead and let's look at the 2026 schedule here for Stanford. Again, they open the year against Hawaii. That's going to be a big time game and for their over under. Last year, of course, they lost this game by 3, so it's not really a gimme. Actually, again, if we go back to 2025, in their out of conference, really didn't do good at all, right? 3-point loss against Hawaii and a 1-point win against San Jose State, and then of course they played Notre Dame and got blown out. So not a ton of confidence there. Also, so when we look at 26, you remember that they didn't play very well against the out of conference last year, even the games you would consider maybe y- easy games. Again, though, whole new coaching staff, new quarterback. It's going to be everything's going to be new here. So they open against Hawaii, and then they get Miami in that second week. They then get a bye. They go at Duke, Georgia Tech, at Wake Forest, who was a much improved team last year, at Notre Dame before Elon to kind of break up that brutal stretch of the schedule. NC State at home, at Louisville before another bye week, and then they go at Virginia Tech, at Cal, and SMU. So the one thing that should be very clear about the schedule it is not easy. I think a lot of people would have Miami as the favorite in the ACC, Louisville and SMU. Actually, if we go look at the odds wise, uh, they play the top three favorites to win the ACC. They all of those teams are on their schedule, so it's not a very easy schedule, and they get Notre Dame. So that 3.5 win total, it does feel low, but when you consider this schedule, it's going to be tough to win 3 or 4 games. I do think they will do it. I think they do beat Hawaii this year. I think they beat Elon, and I think they can find a way to win 2 games. I mean, we saw it last year. Uh, that Cal game, it really didn't feel like they would win that one, and they won it 31 to 10. And even the Florida State game, they won by 7. So it feels like sometimes Stanford always finds a way to win a game or two that they shouldn't. So I lean on the over. However, I'm not very confident in it. I look at these games, I say, like I said with Boston College, I think they're going to be an underdog in probably 10 of these games. The only games I think they'll be favored in is the Elon game and the Hawaii game. So, that should give you a pretty good idea of just where this team is at. I think it's going to be it is a higher ceiling. I think Tavia he did show you some potential as a quarterbacks coach, and good. Apparently, he's a good offensive mind. That's what Andrew Luck said at least. So, if you trust Andrew Luck's mind, um, that should give you a good idea. Of course, he was a former quarterback at Stanford. So, actually, funny enough, I didn't realize this until I did the research. He was replaced by Andrew Luck after he got hurt. So you know, this team, it's a very hit or miss year for Stanford. I think they're just trying to build, they're trying to lay a foundation to get future success. So I wouldn't expect a lot out of the Stanford team this year, but I think maybe you could start to see a foundation for success for years to come. So that is Stanford in the ACC. So the next team we got up is North Carolina. They're sitting there at plus 12,500 to win the ACC. Their over/under is actually 4.5 wins. So again, let's look at last year. Last year it started poorly, obviously with the 48-14 TCU loss. If you remember, there was a ton of hype around that game. Everyone was wondering what Belichick was going to do, and then he kind of laid an egg week one. But then they got wins over Charlotte and Richmond before what I would say is where the wheels kind of fell off. A blowout loss against UCF, blowout loss against Clemson. But, as bad as last year was, it wasn't all bad for North Carolina. It was a 3-point loss to Cal, a 1-point overtime loss to Virginia, before wins at Syracuse and against Stanford. They ended the year with a 16-point loss at Wake Forest, a 7-point loss against Duke, who ended up winning the ACC, and then a big loss against at NC State. So I wanted to bring all that up because I think for a lot of people, North Carolina last year they finished 4-8. Offensively, they were 120th out of 136, and defensively 66. And that was a whole new team. Remember, they had a ton of transfers, and it was just all over the place with quarterback play and everything. And offensively, they just were really, really, really bad. Uh, so there really wasn't a lot of stability, and even with that, they still had some highs last year. They had close games, they had winnable games that they just let get away from them. So I think a lot of people are down on North Carolina this year, but I think the main thing that they changed from last year to this year is, well, the main thing is two things. One, they're bringing in a new offensive coordinator. They are bringing in Bobby Petrino, which, yes, Bobby Petrino, probably not the best human being, but he has been around the college game forever. He's shown to be a good offensive mind, so they're going to hope that he can come in and kind of help this offense, even though last year Arkansas was all over the place. And I think he ended up only winning one game as a head coach in that interim space. He went like 1-7 or something. So now let's look at their quarterback situation. So quarterback wise, it seems like they got a couple guys. They got Travis Burgess, Billy Edwards Jr. is who they're projecting to start. Then they got DJ Mazzone, and then Andres and a Tory Newkirk. So and then Miles O'Neill. So they got some guys, but everything's projecting for Billy Edwards Jr. to be the starter. So Billy Edwards Jr. was at Wisconsin last year, played in just 2 games, 7 for 16, 44% from completion percentage. Did hurt his knee, so that's why he only played in 2 games. But if we look back, he had 3 years before that where he was at Maryland, and in 2024 he had 2,881 passing yards, 65% completion percentage, 15 TDs to 9 interceptions. So he had some success at Maryland. I wouldn't say that's like numbers that'll blow your mind, but it's also nothing to sneeze at, and it is something where he has some experience, and he could definitely come in and be a nice player for this team. So if we look at the schedule, they open the year again against TCU, and then they get ETSU, they get Clemson, Notre Dame, Pitt, Duke, Syracuse, Miami, UConn, Louisville, Virginia, and NC State. So it is a tougher schedule, right? They get Miami, they get Louisville, and they get Notre Dame. Lucky for them, though, all those games are at home, so their hardest games are at home, I guess, if you want to take anything away from that. But if we go back again and we look at 2025, I will say the one thing was defensively, they were pretty solid throughout the year. Uh, Especially in the middle of that year. Like in the middle of the year after the Clemson loss, it was they gave up 20 points to Cal, 17 to Virginia, who was a very good offensive team, 10 to Syracuse, 15 to Stanford. So that middle of the year, if they can find a way to replicate that throughout an entire year, it does give you a lot of confidence. Remember, last year they ranked 66 in opponents' points per game. 24.5 is how many points per game they gave up. They Their defensive coordinators, of course, Stephen Belichick, Bill Belichick's son. They still have Bill Belichick. So the hope is that maybe, year two of North Carolina can have a lot more success with a lot more continuity. New quarterback, new offensive coordinator, second year for Bill Belichick. Hopefully they can kind of stay out of the headlines and his girlfriend cannot make, 1,000 stories this year. And hopefully they can win these games. TCU week one is going to be such a big game because I don't think TCU is, uh, an insanely great team this year. I think they'll be solid. They'll be about, around 6, 7 wins, maybe 8. TCU year in year out are really solid, especially offensively. So I think that first game of the year is really going to tell us a lot about what North Carolina is this year. I think overall, I think the goal of North Carolina should just be, is Bill Belichick our guy here? Can we trust him to build this program and get us to just being a winning program? I mean, just have respect because last year it was up and down, but man, oh man, it felt like every week you were hearing something new about North Carolina and Bill Belichick that you just don't want to hear if he's the head coach of your football team. So a lot of questions for North Carolina, but I actually think they've gone a little bit under the radar this year, and I actually think they can win over 4.5 games this year. I think they will get to bowl eligibility this year. So the next team we got is Syracuse. Syracuse is currently plus 10,000 to win the ACC. If we go look at their over under, it's sitting at 4.5 wins. Syracuse, if we look at it last year, it was a very interesting year because they actually started the year 3-1. They finished 3-9, so they lost their last 8 games, and pretty much everything can be coordinated to their starting quarterback getting injured. But if we look before that, it was a 45-26 loss to open the year before 3 straight wins against UConn, Colgate, and a win at Clemson. They then would go on and their year would basically end up going in flames. I mean, they didn't have another one possession game the rest of the year. They lost by 10 or more in every single game, and most of them by 20. So, really, a year you want to forget. But let's highlight Fran Brown. So, Fran Brown is the head coach. He's coming into his third year, and it is a tale of 2 seasons. So, in his first year at Syracuse, they went 10-3, uh, peaked at 20 in the AP. Actually, finished the year, sorry, 20th in the AP, And then last year, of course, went 3-9. So a very successful first year, especially for Syracuse. But last year it was very, very terrible. So what kind of went wrong last year? So looking at 2024, the first thing that should pop out to you is their points per game in 2024. They scored 34 points a game, ranking 21st out of 134. Defensively, they still weren't good in 2024. They were 96. They gave up 29 a game. But the main thing is Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord in 2024, 4,779 yards, 34 TDs, 12 interceptions, 66% completion percentage. He was airing the ball out. They scored a lot of points, had a lot of good quarterback production, which brings us to 2025. So last year, pretty obvious. They went from scoring 34 a game to 20 a game. They also gave up 34 a game. So points per game wise, they ranked 118th out of 136, and opponents' points per game, they ranked 130th out of 136. And their year basically went up in smoke after Steve Angeli got hurt. Angeli, I hope I'm saying that right. I kind of forget how to say it. He was at Notre Dame before he got to Syracuse. Didn't really play at Notre Dame, but did have some success. But last year, he played in just 4 games, tore his Achilles, and in those 4 games, he had a 63% completion percentage, 1,300 yards, 10 TDs, 2 interceptions. And again, if we if we go back and if we look at his game log here and we look at his game against Clemson, it was 18 for 31, 58%, 2 TDs, no interceptions. So, it wasn't like it was the greatest game ever, but it kind of showed you that with Steve at quarterback, they were a lot better than obviously his replacements. If you look at it, Ricky Collins was kind of his original replacement, 53%, 1,000 yards, 6 TDs, 10 interceptions. And then after that, I mean, it was really bad quarterback play last year, and they just could not recover. The other thing that got a lot worse, if you will look, it's the points per game, right? So in 24 they ranked very bad, but in 2025, 35 points per game is what they gave up, 130 out of 136. So they went out and they hired a new defensive coordinator in Vince uh, Caris. Caris. So he was a defensive coordinator for a long time at Toledo. Well, first off, he was a head coach at Mount Union, and I wanted to highlight this. At Mount Union, I guess he just ran a program. From 2013 to 2019, he went 95-6 at Mount Union in Division III, and actually won 2 championships. So the man can coach. He went on to be defensive coordinator at Toledo, and actually, Toledo, if you've been following college football the past couple years, have had some really good defenses the past couple years. So they're bringing him in and hoping that he can kind of make this defense not even good, just average. I mean, the last 2 years, even in 24, again, when they went 10-3, they gave up 29 points per game, ranked 96. So they're hoping bringing this guy in will just, I don't know, get them to about average defensively. So looking ahead to their schedule, again, their win total is sitting at 4.5. Yes, 4.5. So they open the year against New Hampshire, and then against Cal. Then they go at Pitt before they got a bye week, and then it's at UConn, at Virginia, Louisville, at North Carolina, SMU, Clemson, at NC State, at Boston College, and Notre Dame. So highlighting this schedule, I think the main thing that should really stick out to you is they don't play Miami, luckily, and there's just a lot of winnable games, right? At North Carolina, I just talked about North Carolina. I think North Carolina is going to be better, but that's still a very winnable game. We saw them beat Clemson last year with their quarterback. UConn obviously has a new head coach, new everything. Jim Mora left for Colorado State. New Hampshire, that should be a win. Cal, I think, will be better as well. I really like what they got going in Cal, but that's still a winnable game. They have a lot of winnable games on this schedule. It's all going to come down to how Steve Angeli comes back. Angeli, however you say it, Steve Angeli comes back. Again, he tore his Achilles, so it was a that is a very serious injury. And again, looking at the quarterback play past Steve last year, it was very poor. So really, it feels like this team's success is going to be tied to how good he can play. We've seen Fran Brown and Syracuse in general have some very explosive offenses. So I do think this is going to be a better team than last year. Looking back at 2025, one more time, they went 3-9. They started the year 3-1 though. It felt like a lot of hope, and then you can literally see he tears his Achilles against Clemson after the Clemson game, and then against Duke, 38-3, 31-18, 30-13 against Pitt, 41-16 against Georgia Tech, 27 to 10 against North Carolina. At Miami was 38 to 10. 70 to 7 at Notre Dame, and then Boston College 34 to 12. So the two things that should really stick out to you is they didn't score over 20 points after that Clemson win, and they also gave up 27 or more every game. They gave up 27 in North Carolina and then 30 or more in every other game. So after that Clemson game, it was not only that the offense started to stink, the defense also became really, really bad. So this year, the hope is new defensive coordinator, quarterback comes back, they can have more success. 4.5 is the win total. I like Fran Brown. I like what he's done with Syracuse, and I think this year, hopefully, will be a rebound for them. And so I do lean the over, but I think it's going to be very close. They'll be right at about 4, 5, 6 wins, which is a good year for Syracuse football when you consider that this is not a great program in general historically, but I do think Fran Brown has him going in the right direction. I think this is a big year for him in year three. So the next team we're going to do is Wake Forest for plus 8,000 to win the ACC, and their over/under is sitting at 5.5. So first, let's look at their 2025, and it's a little surprising they're this low because last year they went 9-4 in the season, and that started with a 1 point win against Kennesaw State. So it got off to a very rocky start under their first year head coach. And then against Western Carolina, they blew them out. And then they kind of had two straight losses, NC State and Georgia Tech, before rattling off three straight wins against Virginia Tech, Oregon State, SMU, a blowout loss against Florida State, and they then beat Virginia, North Carolina, and Delaware, a loss against Duke, and then finished the year strong in a bowl game win against Mississippi State. So this was again under first year coach Jake Dickert. Um, and of course, if you look at his resume, he was at Washington State before Wake Forest and had some success at Washington State. Of course, 7 wins, 8 wins, 5 wins, and 3 wins. So overall, he's 32 and 24 in his 5 year career now. 23 and 20 at Washington State, and then again 9 and 4 last year at Wake Forest. And if you look at Wake Forest last year, they were a solid team, right? 64th in points per game at 28, and 44th in opponents' points per game at 22. So it just felt like they did everything solid. It's not like they did anything over the top great, but they just were solid. So let's start. Let's touch on the biggest key to Wake Forest success this year, and that is who they're projecting to be the starting quarterback, which is Gio Lopez. So we already talked about North Carolina, and Gio Lopez, of course, was a starter at North Carolina last year, and it was not pretty for him last year, right? It was 65% completion percentage, 1,700 yards, 10 TDs, 5 interceptions. If you look at his rushing, 133 yards and 3 TDs rushing the ball. It wasn't kind of what I think anyone expected. I think they were expecting more, especially when you look back at South Carolina or South Alabama in 2024. He was 66% completion percentage, 2,500 yards, 18 TDs, 5 touchdowns or 5 interceptions, excuse me, and rushing the ball 463 yards and 7 TDs. So a lot more success at South Alabama, and that's key because the offensive coordinator at Wake Forest is the same offensive coordinator he had at South Alabama. So they're having that relationship already kind of established, and they're hoping that that can kind of translate to success at Wake Forest. And so looking ahead to their schedule this year, and it starts very easy, right? Akron and then at Purdue, their first 2 games of the season. And they better enjoy that because then they go against Miami and then at Louisville. They then get Stanford, and then it's at NC State and at Cal before an off week, and then they get Virginia, Merrimack, at SMU, at Georgia Tech, and Duke. So again, their win total is sitting at 5.5, and the first thing that jumps out at me is they have a very easy out of conference, right? 3 of their out of conference games are Merrimack, Akron, and Purdue. So 3 teams that I think they will be probably touchdown or more favorites in. And that is just to me is it's very key that it feels like they get those 3 wins. And so when we're talking about getting to 5, to get 3 wins out of conference is huge because I think they're going to compete with Stanford, and I think they're going to compete with teams like Virginia and Duke and Georgia Tech this year and NC State and Stanford. I think these are all teams they can compete with because if we look at 2025, they beat SMU by 1. They obviously lost to Duke by 17, but they also, beat, like I said, they beat Virginia by 7. They beat SMU by 1. They beat Virginia Tech by 7. They lost by 1 last year to Georgia Tech. So they showed that they can compete with teams week in and week out. And they could also show that, they were very inconsistent week in, week out. A 17-point loss to Duke and a 35-point loss to Florida State. I don't remember that happening, honestly. I don't know how you lose by 35 to Florida State last year, but hey, it happens. So I think a lot of Wake Forest success this year is going to hinge on, can Gio Lopez go back to that form he had at South Alabama, right? I think Wake Forest has shown under coach Jake Dicker that they can be solid on both offense and defense, right? They showed that last year that they can be a very balanced team. And so if Gio Lopez can be the guy he was at South Alabama, that great dual threat who can pass for 20 TDs and rush for another, 10, I think it's going to show you that they're going to be a very dangerous team. And really, out of all the teams, I don't understand 5.5. I mean, this is a 9-win team last year, and we're only giving them credit for 5.5. So that's a little crazy to me. I think this is a team that I feel like is going to be bowl eligible. They will get to that 6-win mark. So, this is probably so far out of all the teams that I've done, this is the strongest I feel about them going over. I think it's a 6-win team for sure. And I think Wake Forest, this could be the start of a very good little period under Jake Dicker where they're going to have, because, if we look at Wake Forest as a program, it's not really like historically they've been a great program, right? Their win loss, they're 495 and 693 over their history. Under Dave Clawson, they did have some moments, right? They had an 11-win season, some 7 and 8s, but they also had 3-win seasons and 4-win seasons. And really, that's kind of the story of all their head coaches, right? It's up and down. It's an 8-win season, but a 3-win season. I think Jake Dicker can kind of be that 10-year guy if they really want him to, where he wins, bowl eligibility year in and year out and is always around that 6-win mark. So we will see, and this is going to be a big year for Wake Forest to kind of try to continue that success that they had last season. So the next team we got is Duke. Duke is plus 6,500 to win the ACC. Looking at their over/under, it's sitting right at 5.5. So last year, Duke was probably the most interesting team in college football. They finished 9-5, including 7-2 in the ACC, and they actually won the ACC title game despite having uh, 5 losses. They went 7-5 in the regular season, somehow made the ACC title game, won that, and then won their bowl game against Arizona State. Out of conference, they lost to Tulane in Illinois and UConn. So it was a very interesting year for Duke all last year. Talking about their head coach, Manny Diaz, real quick. He's been at Duke now for 2 years. In both years, he's got 9 wins back to back. He's been 18-9 in those 2 years. Very good for Duke. And if you go back to Miami, he was 21-15 in 3 years. So, mediocre, not great, but not terrible. Got a lot of hate for his time at Miami, obviously, but I think at Duke he has found some really high highs and some real success. Looking at their team last year, overall it was a very good offensive team. They ranked 16th in points per game, scored 34.5, ranked 99th on defense. So that's something that they're going to have to get better at. And the big thing was Darian Mensah. Mensah, 67%, 3,900 yards, 34 TDs to just 6 interceptions. And if we go look at 2024, when they went 9-4 also. Malik Murphy was there. Malik Murphy, 60% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 26 TDs, and 12 interceptions. So the big difference this year is obviously quarterback. It's reportedly going to be Walker Egan. That's who they're projecting. He was at San Diego State last year. He's been at San Diego State now for 4 years. The last 2 years, he's been starting. Last year, 59%, 3,000 yards, 17 TDs, 9 interceptions in 24. 57% completion percentage, 2,500 yards, 13 TDs, 10 interceptions. So he hasn't been that great at South Dakota, at San Jose State. Sorry. So the hope is though that they can come in and a program that has been really good the past 2 years offensively, right? 2 years ago they were 26 points per game, even without stellar quarterback play, right? Malik Murphy, super talented, but it's not like he was lighting it up. And then last year, obviously, they ranked 16th. The big note going into this year is they have played the ACC extremely well. The last 2 years, last year they went 6-2 and then ended up winning the ACC title. And then 24 they went 5-3, so that's 11-5 in 2 years. of ACC play. So looking ahead to 2026, you have Tulane at Illinois, Stanford, William and Mary. That's to open the year. And so right there, you have three very, very, very winnable games. After the bye, you get at Georgia Tech, North Carolina, at Virginia, Boston College, at NC State, at Miami, Clemson, and at Wake Forest. Overall, I would say looking at 2025 or 2026 and comparing it to 2025, if you look again, it's just it feels like they're always in every game, right? Even in their losses, it was a 9-point loss to Georgia Tech, a 3-point loss to UConn. Virginia did beat them pretty good, and Illinois beat them pretty good, but then a 7-point loss to Tulane. It just feels like they're always in every game. And if we go back to 2024 real quick, Manny Diaz's first year in a 9-win season in its own right, you look again, it just felt like other than the Ole Miss bowl game, it was a 22-point loss to Miami's bad, but a 1-point OT loss, a 10-point loss to Georgia Tech. That was their only two conference losses. So or sorry, three conference losses, and they played a lot better out of conference that year. Elon and UConn obviously beat both of them in the Middle Tennessee and at Northwestern they won in double OT. So, when we look at this year, Tulane is going to be worse. Obviously, they lost some around. They got a whole new team around there. So I don't think they'll be as good as last year. And Stanford is also kind of in a rebuilding phase, basically a whole new look team. So there's a real chance they could start 3-1, maybe even 4-0 out of the gate. So when we're talking about a 5.5 win total, which is what they have, I would say this is a very good start for it. And then Georgia Tech, obviously Haynes King is gone. North Carolina, they have, they had their own problems last year. I do think they'll be better. Virginia, we'll get into them later, but who knows what they'll look like? They've been up and down over the past couple years and even last year. Week in, week out, they were very inconsistent. Boston College, I don't think is going to be as good. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for wins here. And I would say if I was leaning something, I would definitely lean the over. Considering Manny Diaz has won 9 games in 2 years, I trust his track record there. I do think it'll be close to that 5-6 win mark, especially quarterback wise. It's not the best quarterback situation, so that does concern me. But I think they can find a way to win 5-6 games. So I do lean the over, but it's not something that I feel extremely strong about, especially the more and more you look into their quarterback room and quarterback situation. So the next team up is Florida State. Florida State is sitting at plus 4,500, and they're one of the more interesting teams in the ACC. If we go, they have an over/under of 5.5. And again, let's look at last year. Last year was a 5-7 year. Obviously, 2 years ago they were really, really, really bad, and last year was an improvement actually, but still only 5-7. But it started really well. They started the year 3-0, including a win against Alabama. And then the wheels would kind of fall off. They lost at Virginia in double OT, lost a close one to Miami, lost a close one to Pitt, lost at Stanford before finally getting back on track, beating Wake Forest, and then losses at Clemson, at NC State, at Florida, and one win in that 4-game stretch against Virginia Tech. They finished the year 2-6 in ACC play. So let's talk about Mike Norvell. Obviously, Mike Norvell has now been there uh, for this is year number 7 for him, and at Florida State he has been 38-34 in 6 years. Obviously, 5-7 in 2025, 2-10 in 2024 though. But in 2023, remember that was a 13-1 year where they got left out of the college football playoff. So it's been a very up and down ride for Mike Norvell at Florida State. And just getting into some statistics here, they scored 33 points a game last year, 22nd in college football, and they gave up 22 points per game, 43rd in college football. So actually, by statistics, you would expect this team to be a little better than 5-7, especially that 2-6 conference record. Obviously, Thomas Castellanos was there last year. He's no longer there anymore, so they will have a new starting quarterback. And it was a competition, and it looks like Ashton Daniels is the reported winner of that competition, and he's the projected starter. Looking at Ashton Daniels, last year he was at Auburn, played in 4 games, 57% completion percentage, 3 TDs, 2 interceptions, 800 passing yards. Um, so, not very good. Added in 280 rushing yards and 2 TDs. Now, in 2024, he was at Stanford, where he got a lot more playing time, 63% completion percentage, 1,700 yards, 10 TDs, 12 interceptions. Add in the fact that he rushed for 669 yards and three TDs. And then in 2023, he rushed for 292 and three TDs and passed for 2,200 yards, 11 TDs, eight interceptions. So he's had some success, but it really has not been great quarterback play in his college football career so far. And this is who they are expected to go with. His backup, who he was competing with, is Kevin Sperry. He was at Florida State last year, played in three games, 12 for 17, 194, two TDs. So not much to go off of there. Um, it's very interesting Florida State in general. We look at the schedule and it is very, very difficult, especially to start the year. You look at their start of the year, it's New Mexico State and then it's SMU week two before an off week, and then they go at Alabama, obviously a rematch. And especially with everything that happened last year, I expect it to be uh, an Alabama team that wants revenge for last year. Then Central Arkansas. Then they go through Virginia, at Louisville, and at Miami. So a very, very, very difficult stretch there. An off week, Clemson at Boston College, at Pitt, NC State, and Florida to end the year. Florida, of course, has a new head coach, new quarterback, new everything. John Summerall is there, so completely new look Florida team as well. And again, we go back, it's a 5.5 win total, and really, I just don't see them getting to that six, especially with Mike Norvell. I am completely out on Mike Norvell. I think quarterback wise, they really have a very poor quarterback room. I don't see much, I think it's a downgrade even from last year. I think it was a disaster last year. They were all over the place. There's a lot of talent on the roster, so I'm not going to completely count them out, but I think it was a mistake to bring back Mike Norvell for another year. I think a lot of people, especially at Florida State, wanted him gone. A lot of Florida State fans wanted somebody new, somebody fresh in there. And honestly, I would not be surprised if they lose against SMU and if Alabama blows them out. I would not be surprised if we see a coaching change after this at Alabama game. If it is a blowout, we may see it. My prediction would be after this Miami game, October 17th. I think before that bye week, they fire Mike Norvell right there. Why they brought him back, I don't know, especially after you've gone 7 and 17 in 2 years at Florida State. I mean, the last 2 years, 7 and 17, and they've been getting ranked preseason. They have a lot of talent on the roster, so it's not impossible for them to come out and have a winning season. This is a loaded roster. There's a lot of talent all over the field, but I just can't trust when I can't trust your head coach and your quarterback. It's hard for me to want to buy in to you doing anything of note. So that's Florida State this year. Next up, we have Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is plus 4,000 to win the ACC. They have an over/under set at 6.5. So this is the first team who is projected to be a bowl team. Looking back at 2025, they were a 9-4 team. And they started the year very good. If you remember, they started the year, what is that, 8-0? I thought it was 7-0. 8-0, including wins against Colorado, Clemson, Wake Forest, who ended up being better than people thought, Virginia Tech, Duke, Syracuse, and then eventually they lost to NC State. And then after that NC State loss, it just felt like everything kind of fell apart, right? They beat Boston College, but only by two, a very bad Boston College team, a little too close for comfort there, and then lost to Pitt, who I actually think we'll get to in a second, but I think a lot of people are sleeping on Pitt. And then a very good game against Georgia, in which they lost by seven, and then they lost their bowl game against BYU. But let's talk about Brent Key for a second. Brent Key has been at this is going to be year 5 at Georgia Tech, and every year he has coached, he has had them at a 500 or better team. Now he took over middle of the year. If we look here, he took over middle of the year in 2022. They were 1-3 when he took over. Instantly, he went 4-4 as the head coach. Since then, they have been 7-6, 7-6, 9-4. So a lot of what I feel about a lot of the confidence I'm putting in Georgia Tech this year is because I trust Brent Key. The 3 years before he took over, they were a 3-win team every single year, 3-9, 3-7, 3-9. The year he takes over, they're 1-3 before he takes over. They then go 4-4. So um, Georgia Tech before Brent Key, not a great team. He then takes over instantly. They have a ton of success. Looking at their team last year, they ranked 27th offensively, scoring 32 points per game, and defensively 69th, giving up 25 a game. So above average on the offensive side of the ball and right about average on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the big thing coming into 2026 is Haynes King is gone. He's been there for what feels like forever. Last year, He had 2,900 yards, 14 TDs, 6 interceptions, 70% completion percentage. If you look at the rushing, he had 900 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. So, was a big reason for their success. He's gone. They're projecting that Alberto Mendoza, who was at Indiana last year, younger brother of Fernando, is going to be the starting quarterback. Last year, he was 18 for 24, 286 yards, 5 TDs, 1 interception, 75% completion percentage. So the talent is there with Alberto. Now, is he as good as Fernando? No. But the one thing about him is, while he is smaller and maybe the arm talent isn't as good, he's actually a little bit of a runner. He had 190 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in 13 attempts. And again, he played sporadically, right? He came in 9 games, so most of them were blowouts. So we really don't know much about how he's going to be. But again, I trust Brent Key, so I trust that he can put Alberto Mendoza in positions to have a lot of success. So we look at the schedule, and it is pretty difficult. I mean, you got Colorado to open the year, and I do think Colorado flying a little bit under the radar for Colorado standards, but that's going to tell us a lot about Georgia Tech throughout the year. It's how they come out in this first game. They then get Tennessee week 2 before Mercer and at Stanford. So a very tough little out of conference schedule for them. They've scheduled Tennessee, Colorado, and Georgia out of conference, which is very, very, very difficult. So after the bye week at Stanford, they get Duke at Virginia Tech, Boston College at Pitt, Louisville at Clemson, Wake Forest, and then at Georgia to end the year. Obviously, that's a rivalry game they play every year, and last year was actually closer than I think a lot of people thought it was going to be. So, looking at the schedule, it has its difficulties, but I would say they don't play SMU and they don't play Miami. So the two top projected teams, they've managed to dodge both of them. Um, they do, you see Stanford on the schedule, you see Boston College on the schedule, so that gives you a little bit of confidence. Uh, with a win total at 6.5, it does feel like, hey, they got to go out and win that Colorado game. They have to win the Mercer game, have to win the Stanford game, and they got to, win Boston College, and then find ways to win games like Duke and Virginia Tech, who I think skill wise, I think they're near that Duke tier and that Virginia Tech tier, and I think they're very similar built wise in terms of, I trust the coach and I trust the coach to go give success. But the difference between, let's say, Georgia Tech and Duke is I think the ceiling for Georgia Tech is higher because I think the ceiling on Alberto Mendoza is higher than Duke's quarterback, who we've already gone over. So I think Georgia Tech, to me, I do lean the over. I think this is a 7-5 team. To me, I think I trust Brent Key to get this team to, bowl eligibility at the very least. I trust Brent Key. I think he's done a great job at Georgia Tech, and I'm excited to see what he can do this year and beyond. So that is all for part one. Like I said, part two is going to go up right after this video, so if you have any interest in Cal, NC State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Pitt, Clemson, Louisville, SMU, Miami, I do the same thing in part two. I decided to split them up because this video is very long. I end up talking about these teams a little too much. That's on me. So that'll be posted right after. If you've made it to the end, thank you, and consider subscribing. I'm going to continue to do this, and I might even do it for all the conferences. So that's all I got.